This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Last time, Kit and I spent a lot of energy and time deconstructing this painting, taking things off, the old varnish, the old inlays, the old overpaint, the old fill-in medium, effectively getting it down to its basic raw truth, in preparation for putting it back together, which all begins with inlaying new pieces of canvas from my stock of old canvas into all of the voids where the original has been lost. Where I can match the weight, the weave, and the texture of the canvas, it's ideal. But if I have to choose, I'll take the weight and weave over color, particularly because nobody's ever going to see this once it's retouched. Once the inlays are in place, I'll trace them with my pencil, and then I'll start to cut them out. And yes, this is slow going, and there theoretically could be a technologically based solution to this, but I don't mind the work. It bonds me with the experience of conserving this piece. I get more invested in it the more I work on it with my hands. And also, this slow process gives me the opportunity to both zone in and zone out. My mind is very, very focused on the task at hand. My hands are busy, and yet there's part of my mind that is free to wander, to explore, to daydream, and it feels both really rewarding and really good and comforting to both achieve something, to see your work come to fruition, and also to allow your mind to wander and be free. So I'll continue with all of these inlays, making sure that all of the voids are filled with this canvas. All of the voids except one.
And we're back to the faceless woman.
We are, except now we have a face.
What do you mean?
Well, let me back up. So we've done a lot of work structurally to get to this point. We're kind of prepared for the next big step. We've done all the inlays, painting is clean, the glue's off the back, so we're ready to make some big moves.
Okay.
And you'll notice that we haven't done anything with her face.
Yeah, is that just we ran out of canvas, scrap canvas? Are we planning to do something novel?
It's almost like you know exactly what we're gonna do. Yeah, so we didn't run out of canvas, but we decided to do something kind of different. A couple of months ago, I reached out to the Hermitage in Russia, who has the original version of this painting. They don't have it on display, and it took them a couple of months to A, figure out where they actually have it stored in one of their warehouses, then B, pull it out, and then C, finally, to take some photographs of it for me, which they were kind enough to do, and they sent them to me. And while I had hoped I was going to get super high resolution photographs, I got resolution photographs. They'll work, but...
The flip phone photographs?
Yeah, you know, I mean, look, beggars can't be choosers. I took those images and I manipulated them on the computer because they don't fit perfectly. This is a copy of the original, so it's slightly distorted, things are slightly shifted. The original doesn't line up perfectly, which is to be expected. And then I had them printed by a company that prints digital prints on canvas for artists. Okay. And so what we have here are, we have 4 different versions of the photograph on different weight canvases.
Okay.
And these are all archival materials. So we have linen canvas, we have archival ground, and archival inks. UV stable, you know, kind of the best that you can get, and the price according. Cool. So what we're gonna do is take these and kind of cheat our way onto second or third base, kind of give us a leg up.
Okay.
So if you wanna give me a hand here, what we're gonna do is treat this just like a regular inlay. Instead of copying this, we're going to use this as the inlay.
Oh, wow.
And so if I can get it aligned, I don't know, I think we're kind of somewhere like that, right?
Yeah.
Almost instantly,
She has a face.
she has a face,
Yeah.
right? So a huge coup, but it's not perfect.
No, yeah, it's yellowed. She's a little pinker, and this, like you said, it's a copy. Trying to take photos of a photo and color correct.
Right, it's a little pixelated, it's, you know, it's not perfect. But what it is the release for us of the burden to create, which is a huge thing for us as conservators.
It takes forever.
Yeah, well, it takes forever. It's also wrought with complications because there's implicit bias, and well, do I like the eye to look like this, or maybe a little bit more pink here or there? And while that's how it's been done historically, it's been fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It puts us in a complicated position. If we don't have source material, we're inventing everything, and that's where conservators don't want to be. Like that's
We're technicians.
right. We do not want to have the burden of creating a face. If you don't have one, you have to, but it's an uncomfortable place to be. If you have source material, you can use that and work from that. But we can do better than that, at least I think.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to try this. So like 50 years, 100 years from now, when this painting, if it's still around, is getting conserved again, like, and a conservator comes in and is removing old retouching, is this going to stay intact? Is it like, how are they going to treat that?
It's a good question.
It's going to be like us finding like newspaper on the back of a painting for the lining.
Right,
what the heck were they doing?
Well, I hope that's not the response.
Yeah.
I mean, so they won't see this because we're going to have to go over this and retouch over it because obviously you can see it's not a perfect match. There's a textural difference, so we have to use some clear resin to make this match this texture. And then I'll use this as just kind of like a paint by numbers, maybe, a template to get closer to this.
Okay. Yeah, it takes the guessing out of the shadow and everything and the highlight.
Right, there's a structure to follow. I'm working from the original, just like this artist was working from the original when they made the copy. But yeah, I mean, in 100 years, I mean, I don't know. Well, I mean, what would you think if you were cleaning a painting now and you clean it off and there was like,
yeah.
if you found this, I'm just trying to think like what I would think.
I feel like I would be like, I don't know, maybe like, did this bozo like paint over the original face? Like, because if you're like removing old retouching and that's underneath it and it's not reacting with the solvents that you're using, I'd be like, what is this? Like, I would think that, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I guess if I found this in 100 years, I was working on this painting and it needed to have the conservation reversed, and I came across this, I would hope that somebody in the future would think, well, that's pretty neat. That's pretty creative. They took a print on canvas and put it in there. Oh, that's novel. That's nice. I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, every time we find something that's done in the past that's neat and novel, we kind of make a note of it and say, that was cool. Yeah. Can we reuse that? Can we adapt that? Can we take that approach and extrapolate it? Because even though we're not supposed to be creative in the traditional sense of creating, right, all of these problems we have to solve demand tons of creativity. And some of it is formulaic or rote. We know we have to do inlays. But in cases like this, coming up with a new approach that benefits us, the client, and maybe the larger field of conservation is really exciting. So my hope is that, folks who see this would say, oh, that's really cool and creative. Maybe I could do the same thing.
I remember when I first started working here, one of the first things you told me is like, the mark of like a great conservator is not even knowing they were there. And like, I feel like this is a step towards that.
Yeah, I mean, I hope. I think one of the things that we're always trying to do here is look for new materials, new approaches, things that are faster, better, deliver us better results, novel approaches. I mean, built equipment, pioneered some different techniques. Anything we can do to get from where we are to where we want to go has to be open. Even if it's not prescribed in the annals of conservation lore, if it's not a white paper or in the guidelines, doesn't mean we can't do it. And I think that's one thing that maybe sometimes people get caught up on that. That if it isn't already prescribed, if it isn't already defined or wrote, then it's verboten.
But everything was novel at one point.
Well, right, absolutely. The whole concept of reversible materials was novel at some point, and somebody had to introduce them. And at the time, there might have been pushback. And so I'm not saying that this is revolutionary, but I think that it kind of demonstrates, maybe one of the ethoses that I want this studio to be about, that I'm trying to impart upon you, is that everything and anything is on the table. I mean, we've borrowed techniques from the home building industry. We've borrowed techniques from the medical industry. If it gets us to where we want to go, not only is it fun and cool and neat, but we owe it to ourselves and the clients and the artwork and the artist to try it. Yeah. And if it works, then great.
We have another tool.
Right. If it doesn't work, well, let's revisit it, try to make it work.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just kind of how you evolve a working process.
And these things we're doing, I mean, like you said, it's all the canvas, the ink, everything's archival. The way we're doing it is reversible. So there's not a lot of risk and there's more reward.
Right. I mean, because we're working in modern conservation modalities, the biggest risk is that that George is just not happy, which would be a huge hit to us, but fundamentally we could just undo everything and try it again, or pass it to another conservator who has a different approach, and if, let them have a crack at it.
Yeah.
So, using modern materials really absolves us of kind of the sins of the past.
I'm really excited about it. I do have a question though. Why are we only doing this technique here and not with the other large areas of loss?
It simply comes down to the fact that this is mostly black and brown and kind of amorphous and has no delineated content. And so in this case, we can easily and quickly do this.
This is more like a color blocking.
Yeah, this took weeks of working with the printers and going back and forth and prints and then back and just to get to this point, which isn't perfect. So to do that for all of these places, I think would be, I don't know, I think it maybe would be too much of a burden, right? This already slowed us down a lot. It's going to challenge us. Let's just keep it focused here. If it works, maybe we can pioneer it throughout the rest. But honestly, I mean, this little spot here.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, that's silly.
Yeah, and this is stuff we can do kind of with our eyes closed. This is a much more acute challenge. So that's why we only did it there.
We've been, afforded a really great opportunity with this painting because you have the source material. This is a copy of a painting. This is an opportunity. I'm excited about it.
This is a great opportunity for us.
Okay, you know what? I'm excited. That's all that matters. Because, like you said, this is a copy of an original that's in the Hermitage. We have source material. We can actually take that and create this archival inlay. But if this was an original painting that didn't have source material, you couldn't do that. So how do we transfer this to the next step, to another painting?
Ooh, well, I mean, when you think about it, conservators have always been filling in the voids, right? But maybe there is a way in the future, as technology, materials advance, that we can approach this problem more creatively. We'll just have to see.
I'm excited. I think it'll be a cool step.
Yeah, me too. Kit and I, and George, and the painting got really lucky in that we found the original source material to work from. But one of the ideas that we toyed around a lot with in the beginning, an idea that you folks mentioned a lot, was the use of AI to recreate that face. So much so that we started working with a developer to do just that. We paused it because it wasn't quite right for this project, but who knows, maybe in the future. I mean, AI is such an incredibly powerful tool that used the right way, it can really advance our work, both here in the conservation studio and out in the world in our regular lives, in places that we don't want to spend the time, or things that are banal or not exciting. Things like drafting copy for websites. And yeah, Squarespace has a really powerful AI that will help you do all the boring work so that you can get to the fun stuff. Squarespace's new AI engine isn't going to build your website for you, but what it can do is take your copy and lengthen it. Or if it's too long, it can shorten it and make it more dynamic. It can also take input from you and guidance on the tone and create text for you to start with. But Squarespace's tools don't end there. They have a fluid engine which allows you to design and build your website with drag and drop technology. No more code, no more fussy editors. Simply drag what you want, edit it, move it around, add things, change them, make them look how you like, and there's your website. How cool is that? So head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Baumgartner to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. While in theory, all of what Kit and I talked about makes sense. It's logical, it seems efficient, And if executed well, it should result in pay dirt. But it's untested. And that means that while it's both very, very exciting, it's very nerve-wracking. Because if this fails, yes, we can undo it because we're using reversible materials, but we'll have to undo it and start over. And not only will that be a huge defeat, we'll have to figure out how to solve the current problem. So I'm really optimistic and hopeful that this does work, that all of the research, all of the planning that Kit and I have done will result in success, and that we can then take this approach and we can refine it, figure out where it worked, where it didn't, and make it better for the next time. Make our work better, make it faster, make it more efficient, and deliver better results for the client, the artist, and the painting. And that all starts with creating this inlay. And as I start to fit this canvas into place, well, it feels really magical. Yes, it's not perfect. We've talked about all the ways that it's not perfect, but it feels like a huge step. Because for the first time in a long time, Kit, we can see this painting starting to come together. She now has a face, and that feels like everything. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. There is still a mountain of work to be done. This painting is still just pieces held together with tape, and it needs to be a single piece. All of this needs to be married before we can continue any further. And that's going to happen back at the hot table once again, where we are going to prepare this painting for an interleafed lining. Split into multiple pieces, there is no way that a soft lining would work on this painting. We have to use the interleaf process, whereby we add a rigid substrate in between the original canvas, as seen here, and the new lining canvas, a sheet of Belgian linen. Because we want this painting to be stable and strong, and a soft lining process just won't cut it. Remember back to the soft lining that we took off, how even though it held it together, you could see all of the holes and divots and the massive split? Yeah, well, that's not good work, and we want to avoid that same trap. So back to the back, where we're going to start preparing this painting. And it all begins by laying down a layer of adhesive to the back of the canvas. But before we do that, I'm going to roll on a piece of flat spun nylon gossamer. And I use this whenever I have to do massive repairs or interleaves because it's an interface that allows for a little bit more adhesive and it compensates for any deviations in a smooth surface. Because remember, we're going to be bonding this rough textured canvas to a piece of smooth PET film. And we want a really complete bond. And we get that with maximum surface area. And so if we can fill in some of this canvas texture with this flat spun nylon gossamer and a little bit extra adhesive, then we can ensure that all of the canvas and all of the surface of the PET are in contact. And that's going to ensure that we have a really strong bond and it won't fail in the future. The adhesive is allowed to dry and all of the solvent evaporate, and that leaves just the raw adhesive. It will be reactivated when we apply heat, and then it will bond. But before that, there's a lot of preparation work for the lining. I'm going to remove all of the excess nylon gossamer because it just looks better, it's cleaner, and more presentable. And then we're going to prepare the lining. And I use Belgian linen because A, I like the way it looks, and B, it's really strong, it's a natural material, it's renewable, and it's just a wonderful material to work with. Other conservators like to use synthetic materials like rayon or nylon or sailcloth, but I don't. This is a painting that is potentially hundreds of years old, and while I may use advanced adhesives and retouching paints, if I can keep the look of the painting being old, well, why not? If I can hide all of the new technology, it seems to be an appropriate approach. Technology doesn't have to be the star. If it's doing its job, in fact, maybe it shouldn't be noticed. It should be hidden. That's a debate for another time. For right now, I just have to focus on putting this piece together. And with the interleaf sandwich all complete, the new canvas, the adhesive film, the flat spun nylon gossamer, the rolled on adhesive, the PET film, and the original canvas, I can now execute the lining. I'll wrap the painting in some cotton webbing around the perimeter, add some little through bag connectors, tape down my layer of Mylar or PET film, this being a much thinner version of the one I used for the interleaf, and then I'll extract the air, creating downward pressure. And then I'll turn the table on, bring it up to temperature where the adhesive will reactivate. And then, once activated, I'll start cooling the table. I'll use different tools to make sure that I've got good contact. Here I'm using a piece of balsa wood. And then, once I take the painting out, everything is unified. All of the inlays are now bonded down to the PET film, to the new lining. This painting is structurally sound and stable. It's not going to move, these cracks aren't going to open up, the seams aren't going to open up, because the PET film will immobilize this canvas, where it would normally react to humidity changes and expand and contract. The PET film doesn't. It's rigid, so it prevents movement. And now, all the structural work is complete. The next step of putting this painting back together begins. But it only gets harder from here on out. The next step for Kit and I, and Kit's dog Poppy, who believes she's an essential member of this studio's operation, is to prepare all of these inlays for the fill-in medium. The fill-in medium doesn't really bond all that well to raw canvas. It generally will flake off in the future, and we don't want that because there's a lot of retouching, and to do all that work just to have it flake off would be pretty catastrophic, and I'm pretty sure George would not be happy. So Kit and I guess Poppy too, go around and paint on this acrylic, flexible ground to all of this raw canvas, preparing it for the fill-in medium that we will put on to fill in all of the textural differences. We could simply retouch directly onto this ground. It would be fine, but it would not look good. The surface would not match the surrounding paint layer, and you would see it, and it would look terrible, and George definitely wouldn't be happy with that. So we use a chalk-based fill-in medium. And you can see here, I'm just overfilling because I want to make sure I get everything. And I'll come back later and remove it. Now, here on the face, I'm going to try to just fill in around the edges because I don't want to have to scrape off all of this fill-in medium from the printed material, because even though it's stable, it is a water-based print, and my concern is that if I use water, it may lift off some of the ink, and that would defeat the whole purpose of using this technique. Now, I will make multiple passes because trying to do it in one fell swoop, while maybe more time efficient up front, is going to result in a lesser product, and then you're going to have to do it again, so it won't be time efficient in the long run. After the fill-in medium has dried, I now have to begin the long and slow and arduous and tedious process of removing all of the excess. And it all takes place with a little bit of water, mixed with a little bit of alcohol and some swabs, and slowly and delicately lifting off all of the excess. I just want the fill-in to be where the paint is lost, not over the whole area, not blended in, not like they did it before. And if I do my job correctly, what we'll see is just these little white lines, and that's going to be an indication of where I need to retouch. Well, it's going to be an indication of one of the spots I need to retouch, because just about every surface of this painting needs some amount of retouching. Now, sometimes there are more efficient ways of doing this, let's say using a piece of felt or a sponge, but here it's not a ton of fill-in. But here it's not a ton of fill-in material to remove, so I'm happy to do it with these little swabs. And again, this is one of those techniques where I can zone out a little bit and allow my muscle memory to take over. Once all of that fill-in medium has been removed, I'm going to come back with some clear medium, and I'm going to place it over the printed area, because the canvas texture isn't the same as the impasto texture. That's the surface of the painting, and I want to make sure that it doesn't stand out. But I can't fill this in with the regular fill-in material because it's opaque, and that would defeat the purpose of having a printed image. So I'm using this clear medium to fill in that canvas texture and even it out with the surface of the painting. And all of this excess fill-in will come off too once it's dry. Now, while it's still wet, I'm taking one of my dental tools and scratching in cracks so that this surface matches the surrounding painting. Pretty much the entire painting has cracks all over it, and if this area is too smooth, well, you're going to see it. It's going to stand out. And so scratching in cracks like this is one way that we can trick the eye into believing what we're seeing is original and belongs there, or at least isn't distracting. With all of the fill-in work complete, it's now time to marry the painting with its new support. And we chose to replace the original support because, well, it wasn't original to this painting. It was clearly something that was purchased at an art store and significantly undersized for a painting of this scale and also weight. The support was deforming and just wouldn't hold up to this painting. So we replaced it with a custom-built wooden stretcher. Now, even though this painting is interleafed and isn't going to be moving much and really doesn't need all of the tension that can be afforded by a stretcher, a little bit of tension does help because, of course, the tacking edges aren't interleafed and those will move. In addition, it just looks correct, and we're not trying to telegraph that we did an interleaf here. We're trying to make this painting look like a painting. And part of that is the stretcher. And on top of that, there's really almost no cost difference, so there's no reason not to use a proper stretcher. And the process of uniting a canvas with a stretcher is relatively simple and something that most artists have learned many, many years ago, or not. We start by tacking it in the middle and working our way to the edges. And this way, any slack that's in the canvas, not in this case, but maybe in another painting, can be removed by pulling it towards those corners where the keys will have the maximum effect. It's also just the way I've done it forever, and so habit takes over. Another habit is taking care of the back, cutting off the excess canvas from the lining, trimming out the pieces, cutting it down to size, and then folding it over and tacking it onto the back. There are many ways to tidy up the back of a canvas. You could cut off all of this. You could glue it down, you could tape it down, you could staple it down. It doesn't really matter. I just have a particular way of doing it because I enjoy this process and I think it looks nice. Now, I don't think that anybody is ever going to ask to see the back of this painting. I don't think George will ever see the back of this painting. I think he's going to be mostly concerned with the front of the painting. But in the rare case that he does, he'll see that we've taken care on all of the painting, not just the front. In go the keys into the corners, and then I'll use some more tacks and some fishing line to bind them in place so that they don't fall out and become lost or fall in between the canvas and the stretcher bars and create a dent. That's a really common problem and one that's solved easily with just a little bit of fishing line. So I'm kind of surprised that more artists don't do this and more conservators don't. And now I can take the painting back to the spray booth area and I can apply the resin coating that's going to act as a saturation layer and isolation layer. And it's really going to help me see what this painting looks like. Right now, with all of these dark colors, it's really washed out and really kind of drab. We can't get much definition out of it. And of course, varnish does this. And this resin layer is acting as a varnish. We'll apply a final coat of varnish on top of this after we've done all the retouching. But this is going to help me retouch to what the painting should look like once it's varnished. You'll see when this resin goes on, the colors will get rich and vibrant, and this is what I will retouch against, instead of a washed out and kind of drab looking painting, because then of course my retouching wouldn't be accurate. This is fully reversible and synthetic, so it's not going to deteriorate like a natural resin, and it helps compensate for any tiny little surface imperfections that we didn't fill in or are there because of the painting's life. Remember, we don't want to see the surface, we want to see the image, and to some degree, the surface can be a distraction, at least on this painting, where the surface isn't an active player, it's not part of the content. So, on goes the resin, then it sits to dry, and next time I'm going to tackle the elephant in the room, the missing face.